There are stories from this era that feel almost unreal in their casual brutality. Backstage in Los Angeles, Ray punched Dave unconscious over an argument about an encore. Ray then went back on stage smiling, played on without him, and finished the show as if nothing had happened. Dave eventually staggered back out, dazed, and completed the performance. That's the Kinks in one scene. It begins, as so many English stories do, not in romance or rebellion, but in soot, noise, and necessity. Post-war London wasn't a place that gently encouraged artistic sensitivity. It was a place that taught you to get on with it, keep your head down, and laugh at things that probably deserved therapy.
I was born there, my brother was born there in the front room.
Ray Davies and Dave Davies grew up in Muswell Hill with a household soundtrack that had nothing to do with rock because rock hadn't been invented yet. It was music hall spirit, pub sing-alongs, wartime bravado, and family piano sessions that could pivot from heartbreak to filthy jokes in under 30 seconds.
I used to live across the road, and I used to hear drunks coming out at night when I was a kid, singing all these pub songs, and I thought, one day they're going to be singing one of mine.
Ray was the brooding one, the observer, the kid who heard everything and stored it like evidence.
My first performance was when I was 3 years old in the family living room, and I sang Temptation. You came, I was alone, I should have known that you were temptation.
Life was paradise being the only boy, until one day my mother surprised everybody, including my father, and at the ripe old age of 44 gave birth to another baby boy, and his name was David.
Dave was the spark, the one who wanted attention now, not later, and who treated rules as suggestions made by people he didn't respect.
I can remember searching. I've always been a person that couldn't sit still.
Put those two personalities in the same band and you don't get creative tension. You get a lifelong, high-volume argument that occasionally turns into genius.
Every tension between people who are related, but that sometimes helps music.
Rock and roll didn't politely arrive in their lives. It kicked the door in. When Elvis detonated across Britain, it didn't just change what kids listened to. It changed what they believed was possible. Working-class boys could become gods. Guitars were passports. And if you were angry, confused, horny, restless, or all of the above, you could plug in and make it someone else's problem.
Now I've found that I've got a way to put things over, put ideas over to people. And it's very interesting now, and I don't want to stop.
By the early 60s, Ray and Dave were forming bands in the way British kids did then. Half ambition, half escape route. They ended up with bassist Pete Quaife, and eventually the name that sounded like a wink and a threat at the same time, the Kinks.
Because it was a short name, and people could remember it, you know.
Then came the moment that still feels like a glitch in the timeline. Dave Davies, frustrated with his guitar sound, took a razor blade to the speaker cone of his cheap amp and sliced it up.
I just got a razor blade and I started to cut the cone of the speaker.
This was not a calculated innovation. It was pure irritation. He turned it back on, cranked it, hit a chord, and out came a distorted roar that didn't sound like pop music anymore. If you ever wondered how heavy metal, punk, garage rock, and a whole universe of turn it up until it breaks came to exist, congratulations, it started with a guy vandalizing his own equipment because he wanted it nastier. When the Kinks recorded You Really Got Me, producer Shel Talmy tried to smooth it out, add echo, make it respectable. Ray wasn't interested in respectable. Ray wanted it dry, blunt, and aggressive.
Because of that, it toughened it up and it made it a much stronger song, you know.
In 1964, it went to #1. Rock music didn't just get louder, it got more feral.
Felt more like an inventor than a musician.
And because the universe can't leave well enough alone, success immediately collided with the Kinks' natural habitat, chaos. This was not a band that celebrated wins by hugging. This was a band that celebrated wins by testing how close they could get to self-destruction without fully collapsing. In 1965, during a show in Cardiff, Dave spat at drummer Mick Avory and kicked the drum kit across the stage. Avory finally snapped and swung a cymbal like an axe, slicing Dave's head open. Avory fled, convinced he'd killed him, chased by fans who thought the blood was part of the act. Then came America, which in the mid-60s was the promised land. For British bands, cracking the US wasn't just about money. It was about mythology. The Beatles did it, the Stones did it. If you could conquer it, you weren't just a band anymore. You were history.
You tend to keep more of a low profile than guys like Mick Jagger.
Yeah.
Is that by choice?
No, much better looking than I am. He's prettier than me.
The Kinks arrived in 1965 and immediately behaved like a band that didn't understand the rules and didn't care to learn them. The American music industry wasn't just promoters and radio stations. It was unions, contracts, fees, paperwork, and an entire ecosystem designed to make sure musicians got paid and the machine kept running. The Kinks treated that machine like it was an insult. Add in exhaustion, culture shock, the constant pressure to be charming, and you get the kind of slow-motion disaster that everyone can see coming except the people causing it.
Corporations can't create style, they can only distribute it.
During a television taping in Dick Clark territory, someone made a comment about communists taking over Britain. Ray didn't laugh. Ray stood up and threw a punch. The man he hit wasn't a random nobody. He was connected to the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. And that matters because in America, especially then, the gatekeepers had actual power. On top of that, the band refused to sign certain union contracts and repeatedly clashed with the American Federation of Musicians' rules. In the Kinks' minds, they were defending themselves from bureaucracy. In the industry's mind, they were an unpredictable liability. And then the punishment landed. A 4-year ban from touring the United States.
And unfortunately, in our case, it was a little bit too extreme, and we upset a few people. And I think we were unfairly banned. And in the end, I had to sign a letter of apology that was untrue.
It's hard to overstate how catastrophic that was. The Beatles and Stones didn't just tour America. They built empires there. They became unavoidable. Meanwhile, the Kinks were stuck back in Britain, watching from the sidelines as the biggest market in the world turned into someone else's playground. Momentum died, money dried up, the cultural conversation moved on.
If we'd gone there and we got tangled up with all that Woodstock lot and, you know, and lived in America and that, I think we'd all died of drugs by now.
So Ray did what Ray always does when the world rejects him. He got specific, he got obsessive, he got inward. While everyone else was floating into psychedelia and cosmic slogans, Ray started writing like a social historian with a guitar. He zoomed in on English life, the way people talk, the way class works, the way ambition corrodes you, the way nostalgia can be comforting and poisonous at the same time.
I'm not a journalist, but I write from this ordinary person's perspective.
This is where the Kinks become truly singular. The Beatles wrote universal love songs. The Stones wrote swagger. The Who wrote explosions. The Kinks wrote about your neighbor, your boss, your family. Ray Davies didn't write about England as a tourist. He wrote about England like someone trapped inside it, loving it, resenting it, and refusing to romanticize it.
I think when I write songs, you see, I write a little plot.
That impulse produced Waterloo Sunset, Sunny Afternoon, Dead End Street, and eventually the Village Green Preservation Society. An album that was basically Ray building an imaginary England where the messy parts could be curated, preserved, and held still. On release, it didn't set the world on fire. In fact, it mostly got ignored. It was too English, too quiet, too subtle for a public that wanted louder, wilder, more fashionable sounds. But time has a funny way of rewarding the thing that didn't fit. Village Green eventually became the kind of album people call timeless, which is just a polite way of saying, we didn't deserve this when it came out.
Once we wrap it up in a little neat thing, we think we've got it. Whatever it is, whatever we're trying to express, that's when we lose it.
The 70s arrived and the Kinks, still locked out of America for years and still battling labels, were faced with a brutal truth. If you want control, you don't ask for it, you take it.
Yeah, it's good fun, but it was hard work, and it gave us the energy, the aggression, you know, to start again, really.
Ray Davies was furious at record company meddling and the way his work was handled. He fantasized about blowing things up, But he was smarter than that. He built something. He bought a former biscuit factory on Tottenham Lane and turned it into Konk Studios. Konk is one of the most important chapters in the Kinks story because it reveals what Ray really wanted: total authorship. Not just songwriting, but production, arrangement, sound, narrative, pacing, everything. Konk wasn't a studio to him. It was a fortress, a kingdom where no A&R person could walk in and suggest anything. A place where the Kinks didn't have to pay for outside studio time, didn't have to answer to anyone, didn't have to compromise. And like all fortresses, it protected them from enemies while slowly poisoning the people inside.
Most people, creative people, have that demon inside them. Demon inside me makes you do this.
Ray ran Konk with a discipline that bordered on obsession. Long days, endless takes, mic placements tweaked until everyone forgot why the song mattered in the first place. Musicians weren't invited to contribute so much as ordered to execute. Even brilliant players could be reduced to hired hands under Ray's direction. If you think that sounds unbearable, imagine being Dave Davies, a guitarist whose entire identity was instinct, volume, and feel, trapped inside a world where the band leader treated spontaneity like a disease.
As artists, I think we need to express what is unexpressible, because I think in that zone, in that what I call moment of purity, is what we really are as human beings.
To produce, you've got to be a bit cynical and get Dave in the right attitude to be aggressive.
Dave reacted the way Dave reacts. He turned it into theater of his own. He explored mysticism and the occult, chalking pentagrams on the floor, dragging a kind of spiritual chaos into Ray's carefully controlled environment.
My brother is much brighter than I am. I'm kind of a lost soul, really, but he's very in touch with his spirit, his soul, the cosmos. He's very ethereal.
Two brothers, one trying to control the universe, one trying to set it on fire. Konk became less a studio than a pressure cooker, where their conflict was recorded in high fidelity.
Shut up, Dave! Dave! That's my brother, Dave. Yeah.
This era produced the Kinks' rock operas and theatrical experiments, Preservation, soap opera, Schoolboys in Disgrace. These weren't half-baked ideas. They were ambitious, satirical, dense productions that treated rock like musical theater with teeth. On stage, Ray turned the Kinks into a traveling pantomime, with backing singers, brass, costumes, characters, and narrative arcs. It was fascinating and exhausting, sometimes brilliant, sometimes baffling, and for Dave, often humiliating. He wasn't just playing guitar, he was playing a role in Ray's world.
I've never been rock and roll, so I don't have the sunglasses to prove it.
Band members started breaking under the strain. Keyboardist John Gosling, after being pushed through endless retakes, finally snapped and walked out, telling Ray, "This isn't the Kinks anymore." That line hits because it's not just about sound, it's about ownership. When a band becomes a dictatorship, the people inside eventually stop feeling like bandmates and start feeling like employees.
I can write about my manager as a well-respected man because he's acting a part all the time. I think everybody's acting a part. I'm acting a part right now. I'm probably totally different to the way you see me now. When I go in a room by myself and I write a song, I don't know I am because I'm just doing it now. But everybody is acting.
By the mid-70s, Ray recognized something that great artists sometimes resist. The audience had moved. Rock had changed. The Kinks could either adapt or become a cult artifact, and there was still unfinished business with America. The band had ended years earlier, but the lost momentum never fully returned. So Ray did something bold. He pivoted, hard. He signed the Kinks to Arista Records and aligned with Clive Davis, who didn't want quirky English theater. He wanted an arena band. He wanted a live powerhouse that could sell tickets in American stadiums. Ray promised to deliver. Costumes were dropped, rock operas were shelved. The Kinks went back to being a band that could hit you in the chest. This is the rebirth era, and it's one of the most satisfying plot twists in their story.
As artists, I think our job, if you like, is to try and show that there's more to life than what we see.
Sleepwalker brought them back into the US charts. Misfits kept the momentum. Low budget turned them into working-class heroes in Reagan-era America, speaking directly to recession anxiety, gasoline shortages, and the feeling that the system was eating you alive. Dave's guitar surged back into the foreground harder and heavier than ever, as if he'd been storing up riffs during the theatrical years and was finally allowed to unleash them.
I've never been nervous before I go on stage. Never. Because to me, it's almost like I can live now.
American audiences, many of whom hadn't lived through the Kinks' 60s peak, didn't see them as nostalgic. They saw them as current, loud, relevant, and in a strange way, that was justice. The band that had been bureaucratically exiled from America returned as an arena machine. But if you're waiting for the part where success makes the Davies brothers appreciate each other, you've been watching the wrong documentary. Success didn't bring peace. It brought higher stakes, which meant bigger fights.
We were never as bad as we were made out to be in the press and on TV. And we had some pretty horrendous fights when we were starting out, pretty vicious.
There are stories from this era that feel almost unreal in their casual brutality. Backstage in Los Angeles, Ray punched Dave unconscious over an argument about an encore. Ray then went back on stage smiling, played on without him, and finished the show as if nothing had happened. Dave eventually staggered back out, dazed, and completed the performance. That's the Kinks in one scene. By the early 80s, the Kinks were living in a split reality. In America, they were playing big venues and selling records. In Britain, they were treated as a strange legacy act, a band from the 60s who didn't fit the neat narratives. That tension set up the greatest irony of their entire career. In 1982, Ray wrote Come Dancing, inspired by his sister's youth and those Saturday night dance halls. It's tender and observational, but also sharp in that Ray Davies way, where nostalgia is never pure. It's always haunted. Clive Davis hated it. He thought it was too parochial for American radio, too English, too local. Ray ignored him, filmed a video set in a dance hall, cast himself as a sleazy Uncle Frank figure, and waited. Then MTV got involved, and suddenly the Kinks were in heavy rotation. The song climbed the Billboard charts and reached number 6, becoming one of their biggest US hits ever. The success didn't heal the band. If anything, it sharpened every contradiction. Drummer Mick Avory, who had endured decades of chaos, finally left in 1984, ending the last long-running connection to the original lineup. New members came in and quickly learned the Kinks' rule of survival. Nothing is normal, and everything can become a fight. By 1985, humiliation began stalking them again, especially in Britain. Their record contract ended, and no UK label showed real interest. An executive reportedly dismissed them as geriatrics, which is the kind of insult that sounds funny until you remember how much of rock culture is built on age denial. Dave tried to get the band involved with Live Aid, the biggest rock event of the decade, and was told they only wanted the biggest acts. Ray later joked bitterly that apparently the Kinks weren't as big as some of the bands who did get the call. That same year, the internal war erupted at West Point Military Academy. The tension between Ray and Dave spilled on stage through sarcastic remarks, visible hostility, and then into physical violence afterward. A punch was thrown. Keyboardist Ian Gibbons later confirmed what everyone suspected. This wasn't sibling rivalry anymore. It was mutual destruction. And yet, like a curse, the Kinks continued. Partly out of obligation, partly because they still had an audience. Partly because neither Ray nor Dave really knew who they were without the other to fight against. By the mid-90s, communication had deteriorated so completely that they were reportedly using fax machines to communicate rather than speaking directly. The end came quietly. The Kinks played their final show in Oslo in 1996. No farewell tour, no dramatic announcement, no grand goodbye, just a last performance and then silence. In 1998, the legal partnership dissolved. Ray and Dave became separate entities in every meaningful sense.
The South attracted me to go to New Orleans. It's primarily folk music, Cajun music.
In 2004, Ray Davies was shot during a mugging in New Orleans. a bizarre and brutal reminder that life can still ambush you even after you've survived your own band.
His accomplice pulled up in the car and he took Clint Eastwood pose, Magnum Force, shot me. Fortunately, I got out of the way. It caught me in the upper leg.
Not long after, Dave suffered a major stroke, threatening his ability to speak and play. In 2015, Ray and Dave shared a stage again, performing You Really Got Me together publicly for the first time in nearly 20 years.
Why are you doing a Van Halen cover? And so I had to educate him that it was Van Halen that were doing the cover, not us.
In the years after, there were repeated hints of new recordings, unfinished tracks revisited, old sessions reopened. Sometimes the Kinks story feels like it refuses to end, not because the band is active, but because the songs keep resurfacing in new contexts. Their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction in 1990 sits in the middle of the timeline like a delayed verdict. By the time the Hall recognized them, their influence was already undeniable.
Yeah, I suppose it means a lot to fans. You know, when you get fans sending you pictures of them standing next to one of your old guitars in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Look what I got.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah.
Heavy metal traces a direct line back to Dave's broken speaker tone and the riff of You Really Got Me. Punk traces a line back to their bluntness, their refusal to polish away ugliness. Britpop traces its DNA straight into Ray Davies' obsession with Englishness, class, and everyday detail. Oasis, Blur, Pulp, and 100 other acts didn't just admire the Kinks, they borrowed the blueprint.
I heard Blur on the radio, and I thought it was Ray.
By the 2020s, the Kinks had been fully reappraised. They were now treated as foundational.
Oasis were a band that couldn't be stopped.
Their 60th anniversary campaign and anthology releases in the 2020s underlined the point. The Kinks weren't just a band from the past. And the funniest part is that the Kinks never behaved like a band trying to be loved. They behaved like a band trying to survive itself. By 2026, there is no fully active, regularly touring version of the Kinks doing a giant world tour. What exists instead is something arguably more enduring, a legacy that doesn't need new chaos to stay alive. Ray wrote like a novelist who happened to have a band. Dave played like a man trying to tear the walls down. Put them together and you get a body of work that is funny, bitter, tender, vicious, and uniquely human. The Kinks were a family band in the truest sense. Not harmonious, not functional. Bound by blood, memory, resentment, and love, the kind that doesn't behave nicely and doesn't always feel good. They didn't escape their past. They turned it into art. They turned conflict into melody, frustration into riffs, and English contradiction into songs that somehow became universal. And in doing so, they created a catalog that sounds like no one else who ever lived, a band that kept reinventing itself even while trying, repeatedly, to destroy itself. That's the Kinks, not a fairy tale, not a tidy legend. A real rock and roll story, loud, funny, brutal, and impossible to forget.